Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us. I'm Alejandra Varela, and I'll be facilitating today's discussion. Some of you, let's start. Some of you have joined us last year for a very dynamic session focused on why manufacturers are moving beyond Excel for production scheduling. That conversation addresses why spreadsheets eventually reach their limits. Today's discussion intentionally begins after that realization. We're assuming that most manufacturing leaders already recognize Excel it's no longer sufficient. But what's more interesting is what's happened after that realization. Because, you know, Excel rarely fails dramatically. It doesn't crash the operation. It simply becomes heavier, something like a normal day. It seems to start feeling heavier and heavier. So, just to starting this conversation, we want to ask you, and we are going to launch a poll. What impact do you feel most in your day-to-day scheduling processes? There's some options, so if you can just answer, and at the end, we also will launch the the answers. So we are going to give a little bit more time if people is joining, I see. So give a couple seconds. And if you're just joining, it's the perfect timing. We're kicking things off with a quick poll, just to check on where your scheduling friction shows up in your organizations. So thank you. I see some answers going on, so that's good. And you can, yeah, this will be closed. So, just as a reminder, this is not a product discussion. It's a strategic conversation grounded in operational reality. So, to start, joining me today are two voices who approach this challenge from different angles and also for having like the two lenses. Um, First of all, we have GCM Business Consulting and Technology. They are a private consulting and technology firm headquartered in Mexico City that is specialized mostly in manufacturing industry and supply chain optimization. With over 20 years of experience in Latin American market, Héctor, partner at GCM, works directly with organizations as they prepare for operational transformation. And representing the optimization side in technology, we have PlanetTogether. PlanetTogether is a leading provider of advanced planning and scheduling solutions, backed by 20 years of research and innovation, originating from Cornell University and trusted by top manufacturers in pharmaceutical, chemicals, food and beverage, and automotive. PlanetTogether helps organizations simplify complex production scheduling and drive operational excellence. Chris from PlanetTogether works across industries, observing how scheduling maturity affects decision making, risk, and performance. So, together, this partnership brings both a strategic consulting lens and a specialized APS technology required to solve modern challenges. So let's start this conversation. Thank you both for joining us. Thank you, Chris, for being here today. I would like to start with this question. Um, since you work across wide range of manufacturing environments and you see these patterns already repeatedly, from your perspective, how does the cost of a schedule of a spreadsheet-based scheduling actually begins to surface?
Yeah, good morning, Ali. Thank you for having me. Yeah, so you kind of already touched on it a little bit. When we look across all the environments, still largely scheduling with Excel, the first thing I always tell people is the cost doesn't show up where you expect it to. It's more of a slow, familiar descent, right? So rarely does somebody say, Excel is the problem, scheduling is the problem. Instead, the cost surfaces more as operational noise, right? Some telltale signs that you would see would be planners spending most of their day recreating the schedule instead of actually planning. Schedules change so often that the production teams stop trusting them is basically the main thing that we see is people trying to do their own thing as opposed to actually rely on a schedule because they don't trust it anymore, right? Expedites become more normal, and from a top down perspective, leadership gets reports that explain what already happened as opposed to what's going to happen next. So Excel doesn't fail loudly; it more fails in the background, and that's what makes it really dangerous. So three things that I kind of want to go over here that I jotted down. The biggest cost of remaining in Excel is that in a spreadsheet-based environment, every meaningful change requires a lot of manual effort, right? So someone has to check multiple tabs, they have to cross-reference files, and mentally account for all of the individual constraints that aren't modeled anywhere in your specific field, right? Because of that effort, teams hesitate to actually think ahead to ask what if questions into the future, right? And that's not because they don't care about their jobs or they're not very good. It's just because every scenario to predict it is time consuming and it's not accurate to evaluate when they do that. Over time, judgment becomes more about gut feelings, and that starts to replace the actual data and analysis that you would like to have. So, tribal knowledge fills the gaps where the system cannot help, right? So, you rely more on tribal knowledge, you rely more on gut feelings, and the planner actually becomes the system. And when this happens, we're seeing this with a lot of companies that have multiple plants where they lose the consistency and any possible scalability that they might have with that. The second point, another place you see the cost is more operational risk. Spreadsheets do not understand constraints. I touched on constraints a little bit earlier here, but constraints are super important just because in Excel, they don't enforce setup rules, labor qualifications, cleaning logic, or material timing. Meanwhile, a more advanced APS can do all of those things for you automatically, right? So all of those things, all of the rules right now are living in someone's head, not in the schedule. So the schedule may look feasible on paper and it looks like a great idea, but it then actually fails once it reaches the shop floor, right? And the third thing is when priorities change, downstream impacts are not visible until it's too late. So when this happens repeatedly, the first thing that breaks isn't going to be Excel, it's going to be the trust in your organization on the schedule. So trust between planning and operations, trust between manufacturing and customer facing teams, firefighting becomes more of the norm, expedites feel unavoidable, and leadership compensates. There we go. Leadership compensates by adding buffers, more inventory, more overtime, just to protect business from more of an uncertainty, right? So those are some of the issues. It's not necessarily the tool itself, but it's kind of the slow daily tax it places on decision making, on alignment, and on confidence. Excel does not cause chaos on the first day, right? It more trains your organization to quietly live with that chaos.
Well, thank you, Chris. What stands out in what you're describing is that risk isn't technical, it is organizational. So you're highlighting decision latency and erosion of trust and invisible constraints. So thank you. So next question will be for Hector. Hector, when you work inside organizations that are still scheduling this way, what risk do you see leadership often underestimates?
Thank you, Ale, and thank you for this time.
Sure.
Um, um, what we have seen most often on organization is not necessarily inefficiency. It is dependency, and we will talk a little bit more about dependency. But a spreadsheet-based scaling system tend to rely mostly on individuals rather than processes. Chris mentioned, but knowledge accumulates in people's head. Sometimes personas on the shop floor are the only who knows in the organization their own time, cleanup time, setup time, lead times, etc. And that's important information for scheduling. And as long as those individuals are present, the system looks stable. But that stability is fragile. Uh, and the most of the time when demand changes suddenly, when supply is disrupted, or when a key planner is unavailable, or even cannot take vacation because he or she is the only who knows how to create the production scaling. So the lack of structure becomes visible very quickly. Another risk is the organization misalignment. And what does misalignment means in this way, in this sense? Different areas in the same organization optimize different outcomes or goals without realizing it. And that's simply, for instance, operation focus on throughput while sales focuses on delivery, uh, finance focuses on lower costs, but a plan and one plan sometimes cannot include all the goals of different areas. So, a simple question: what's the best production plan or the best production schedule? It depends on the area who answered the question, and it depends on the organization. Long production runs, not too many produce finished products, equipment utilization at 100%, and delivery on time, no matter at what cost. So it depends. It depends, and it depends also in the time when the organization need to take that decision. Um, the scale becomes a negotiation rather than a governing mechanism. Um, this is why many organizations feel busy but not in control. They are constantly reacting, even though nothing looks to be broken. And talking about, I will spend some few minutes about maturity, maturity in organizations. Um, in more mature organizations, scaling is not considered as a tactical activity. Um, Rather, it is considered as a business capability. Scaling connects strategy to execution. It provides a shared reference point for decision making. It should be a tool for decision making. Scheduling should help us also to answer questions such as simple question that day to day we have to answer. Which customer or product should be prioritized when capacity is constrained? If we need to make a change or on the production scaling, what are the impact on the whole deliveries and the cost of that change? Of course, we need to answer before doing any change. And finally, what trade-offs align with the current business objectives? Um, I would say we see a clear maturity progression of companies in the following way. Early stage organization focus on getting a schedule to work. Mid-stage organization focus on making the schedule efficient. And advanced organization use the schedule to guide the business. In my opinion, the difference is not technology alone, it is intent. Of course, technology helps to speed up the process of scaling, take decision, make changes. Uh, I would say that. Thank you, Ali. Go ahead.
Perfect. Yeah. What's interesting, it's what you're both describing. It's that maturity is not accidental. It's something that happens in repeats if we keep it as an organizational way. So to lead that, and that brings us to an important question. How does an organization know where it truly stands? So I think the answer, and we also know the answer is the readiness. We need to treat readiness as a part of a process to know if we are ready to make that transition. Across manufacturing's transformation, there is a recurring pattern. Success depends less on the sophistication of the technology and more on the organization's ability to govern the scheduling decisions that are made. So, based on that pattern across many implementations, readiness tends to fall into a small number of dimensions that are data visibility, process clarity, cultural alignment, metric consistency, and continuous improvement discipline. So there are several. When organizations reflect across these areas, the gap that surface are rarely technical. They are organizational. So scheduling ownership it's unclear, metrics conflict across function, processes rely on habit rather than definition. So let's continue with Chris. I will make another question around. Let me just Chris, when organizations improve scheduling maturity, what kinds of outcomes tends to follow?
Yeah, good question. Let's make sure I'm not on mute. Perfect.
Huh.
I've had more embarrassing
No.
webinars that way in the past. Yeah, so basically improvements, they're fairly predictable. Uh,
Mhm.
as you can see, I know you have some on the screen right there. When you add sequencing and constraint awareness, you often reduce changeover significantly. Greater schedule stability tends to improve on-time delivery performance and reduce the number of late jobs, right? We've seen this particularly recently in the beverage, CPG, and chemical environments as of late. But I would say the biggest change that you might not realize, it wouldn't be in the optimization. It's more of the clarity that you'll get. Now, I don't want to over exaggerate here. I'm not offering a silver bullet, right? Organizations are not suddenly going to get a perfect schedule that's never going to need to be changed, right? What they get is just a more believable schedule. So for the first time, everyone is looking at the same version of reality, right? Constraints are visible instead of debated. When something is late, there's more of a clear reason for it. And that alone changes the behavior across an organization. The next shift that will happen is decision quality. And this usually shows up before any of the KPIs really move. Teams stop relying on gut feelings and start using their evidence that I spoke about earlier, right? What if scenarios become more safe to ask because you can actually see the impact before you commit to a new schedule, before you commit to a new sale, before you commit to new machinery or whatever that might be for your next step in your business, right? Planners stop spending their day moving jobs and they start actually managing more high level priorities. That's the important change there. This is where time comes back to the organization, or time feels like it comes back to the organization, not because people are working faster, but because rework, second guessing, and unnecessary meetings start to disappear and become less and less frequent because they're not as necessary when everyone's on the same page. And that's the stability that kind of reduces the changeovers, smooths the labor usage, and improves the material timing, right? Inventory comes down in places that it should without increasing risk. Customer commitments become more reliable because they're grounded in real capacity, not just your best guesses, right? So what we notice is that these outcomes tend to reinforce each other. The better visibility leads to better decisions. Better decisions leads to more stable execution. The more stable environment creates space for continuous improvement to actually take hold, right? And lastly, I'll leave you with one of the biggest shifts. Leaders can ask better questions. And that's the thing that we really get excited about here is the leaders or the whoever is going to you rely on your organization to ask really good questions can be able to ask in detail answers to what happens if demand shifts, what happens if we add a product line, what happens when we have 17 people out for this holiday in 2 weeks, what happens, what is actually constraining our growth right now. Those questions are no longer hypothetical, they become more answerable, right? And the biggest shift that we see is planning stops becoming about keeping up with your current constraints and becomes more about staying ahead.
Wow. So what we're hearing is that maturity changes not only operational outcomes, it changed the quality of leadership conversations, right? It's important part so we can make even better decisions and influence more in the company. So and also this leads to a concept, it's resilience. So Hector, I want to ask you, when that shift happens, how does it influence how organizations think about growth and resilience?
Well, I guess there is not a simple answer or only one answer, but
Mhm.
it depends basically on the organization. But when readiness is high, scheduling becomes a source of confidence. Uh, I will spend some minutes talking about what we have found during discovering meetings with operation or production managers in different companies. In Mexico or Latin America, the main pains are consistent. And what are those pains? Again, dependency on the planners because they are the only person in the company who knows how spreadsheet works to do a production schedule, reflecting the whole processes involved on the production of the spreadsheet, taking decision on how to change the production schedule when they need to add quantity or a new product on the production schedule. Of course, as I mentioned, they need to take decision with supporting information and what's the impact of doing that change and the time spent to reschedule all the processes involved. This includes what if scenarios or simulation and information that looks simple, but it's very important for scheduling, cleanup times, setup times, production lines or departments work in different shifts. All that information cannot be reflected on spreadsheet. When the company or the organization are aware about this situation, they are ready to leave spreadsheets and look for scheduling tools. And what's the difference when we are using a scheduling tool in organization? Well, we can see it in a simple shot. The almost eternal struggle between sales and manufacturing is reduced dramatically. Uh, so sales can commit based on reality. Operation can protect flow rather than constantly reacting. And organization can evaluate growth opportunities and very important using the actual constraint. Constraint it's a word that we are repeating in this conversation. Um, on scaling projects, we have seen organization reducing lead times dramatically, or at least they have real lead times. So they improve promised shipment days, and they even increase sales without adding capacity, simply by improving how decisions are made, simulating, sharing decision, having a tool. And finally, I would say at this point, scaling is no longer a bottleneck; it becomes a stabilizing force. Thank you, Ale.
Wow. Okay. Again. So what we have explored today is not a technology conversation. It's a governance and capability conversation. So Hector and Chris, thank you for helping us unpack that. We are going to invite you to learn a little bit more about our readiness. We have a free ebook, a freebie that we also will be sharing, and that will help you recognize, something that feels familiar in your processes, and also to get to it's just a simple self-assessment that will help you to get through to identify where you're stucking and also to evaluate if you're ready or not. If also, sometimes you need to make some other changes, even, with the company itself, with the team members on your team, and also evaluate more. So this is a very complete guide that will help you. So we will send a copy of this after this webinar. So that leads us to the Q&A. So let's see if you have some question. Also, we have just share here on the screen some other questions just to help you feel motivated. Paloma, can you help me see if we have some questions or?
Sure.
And if not, again, feel free to reach out to us. If you have any project that you want to talk about, just reach directly to us, to our emails, also to our main websites. So there's no questions. Perfect. So I think this is it. Thank you guys for joining, and we will send a copy for the recording. And yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Hector.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Appreciate it.